Students. In today's class, we are discussing further. In the last class, we had already talked about what directive principles are and what is a welfare state and the difference between fundamental rights and directive principles. Today, we will be moving further and we will be discussing one category of directive principles. So, in this chapter, basically, we are dealing mostly with two categories, either the ones which are related to social equality and justice, or the ones which are related to economic welfare. So in today's class, we are mainly focusing on the social equality and justice part. So basically what we are doing today, you already know, you have studied either or you have read in the newspapers. If you read, it's very, and some of these you are studying since class 7, so it's a repetition class for you. So what has the government done to implement social economic equality and justice? So firstly, you are aware that this directive principle has now become article. That means it's a fundamental right now, and we are talking about the fundamental right, which is article 21A, the right to education. So earlier, when this was not a fundamental right, first it became a directive principle, and later from a directive principle it became a fundamental right. So basically this directive principle is similar, and it says that it is the duty of the state to provide the right to education to all the citizens between the age of 6 to 14, and these citizens should be given free and compulsory education in the government and the government aided schools. What government aided schools means? Government schools, you already know. That means in certain schools the government gives some fund, and those schools are maintained out of those funds which are given by the government. So in those schools also, it is compulsory to provide free and compulsory education to all children between the age of 6 to 14. This act also provides that even the private schools which are running, they should reserve 25% of the seats for the people belonging to the weaker sections of society. That means the so-called for the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes, 25% of the seats should be reserved in the schools which are private as well. So basically, not only the government aided and the government schools have to give free and compulsory education to the children between the age of 6 to 14, but the private schools, they also have to maintain 25% of the seats for the people belonging to weaker sections of society. The second point we are talking about, even in these schools, some special scholarships are provided to those children who are from the socially or economically weaker sections of society. Supposingly, if they are from a poor family, they cannot afford those services. So proper scholarships are given to them, so that free of education or at a very minimal price, depending on the merit of the child, the parents can educate them even to higher secondary and even university level education, so that the child, if they have merit, they can succeed and do well in life. So this system of reservation, basically, you already know about the system of reservation in jobs and in educational institutions. You have studied in the previous chapter how much percentage is reserved for the OBCs, SCs and STs. So basically, under the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, we are mentioning that even any of those families which are economically or financially weaker, they have a provision for getting scholarship from the government. Even free books are provided to the children in the government school, uniforms are provided to the children in the government school. So most of their needs are taken care of, for the simple reason because the government wants to uplift all these people and make sure that all children between the age of 6 to 14 are not indulged anywhere else other than studying, which is important for them. Again, this third point which we are discussing, it was earlier a directive principle, but now it has become a fundamental right. We are talking about Article 17. As you now know that now untouchability is a punishable offence, but earlier it was also a directive principle which makes sure that untouchability has been made an offence punishable by law, and anybody who practices any form of untouchability, it is punishable by law. They have to pay, or they will either be arrested or they have to pay a very severe fine. So it is punishable offence. The fourth one is a very recent addition. It says that it is the duty of the government to provide justice to the economically weaker sections, EWS they are called. So that means that this basically, earlier you know that SC/ST, they were getting reservation in the government jobs and higher education. So this reservation which they were getting, this was given under Article 46. In the directive principle, I told you Articles 36 to 51 are directive principle. So the directive principle Article 46, it stated that it is the duty of the government to promote the educational and economic interest of the weaker sections of society. So under this Article 46, many reservations were earlier made for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. And recently, last year, another reservation was added for the economically weaker sections. These economically weaker sections are from the upper caste or from the general category that we say. So in the general categories, those family which are very weak economically, they are poor, they don't have finances, for them an additional 10% reservation was added in the government jobs and higher education. And this was done by the 103rd Amendment Act, which was passed in January 2019. So what is the criteria? Which type of general category family which is poor will be considered under this article? So such people, such families whose parents, they have an annual income of less than 8 lakh in a year, or such people who have less than 5 acres of farmland in the villages, or such people whose houses are very small, less than 1000 square feet in a town. So that is the criteria which is given. Either the main income holder of the family earns less than 8 lakh in a year, or if they are in the village, they have less than 5 acres of farmland, or if they are in the municipal town area, they have house which is lesser than 1000 square feet. Such people, they can register that I am under the economically weak section of the society, and they can get enjoy additional 10% reservation for them in the government jobs and higher education. So this was added recently in 2019 by the 103rd Amendment Act. I hope this is clear to all of you. So basically it is an attempt of the government where it is trying to uplift everybody and trying to bring them on social par, because it's natural that the people who have more money, they can afford more services, advanced classes, tuitions, computer coaching, a lot of facilities they can give to their children. But the poor people or the left out people, they can't do that. So in order to bring them on par with the society, such changes are being made by the government. Which brings us to economic welfare. We are doing only certain portions of this topic today. The first one, it talks that the government has abolished the zamindari system and it has introduced the land reform program to do away with the old feudal socio-economic structure of rural India. What this means is that earlier, before independence, the Britishers, they used to run on a system of land revenue which was called the zamindari system, and it was a feudal kind of structure. That means feudalism you have studied in class 7, where the Britishers were at the top, then there were zamindars, then there were people who they had appointed to collect the tax. But the last person of the structure was the farmer, who was exploited the most and who had to pay very ruthless, very cruel taxes irrespective of whatever his income or produce may be. So this system was felt that it is very, very harsh, it is very strict, and a farmer or a person is at the suffering and the receiving end. Even if he has or does not have money, he has to pay. So it is an economic form of economic exploitation. But in directive principles, when we are talking about economic equality after independence, then it is very, very necessary that we completely remove any such system which is there before independence. So as a result, this zamindari system was abolished, it was permanently removed, and such system, because they represent a feudal structure, they represent an exploitative structure which was happening in India, in the rural India and the village India before independence. So that is the first one, abolition of zamindari system. The second one seems a little complicated, but please listen to it carefully. I'm sure you will understand. Do not get scared by the name because it's a long name. So this is the right to fair compensation and transparency in land acquisition, rehabilitation and resettlement bill 2013. So this bill basically was passed in 2013, and there are 3-4 words which you need to understand. So in order to understand this act, so please underline in your book the word acquisition, and you should write the meaning of acquisition. It is the act of obtaining or buying something. The act of obtaining or buying something is acquisition. Similarly, rehabilitation is to return something to someone. So rehabilitate means to return something. And the third one is resettlement. Resettle means to move people to a new place due to a particular situation. So when we are moving a person to a new place due to a particular situation, that is resettlement. So now let's understand what this act means. So basically, they are saying that a person should be given fair compensation if their land is being acquired, if their land is being taken by them. So basically it says that either the government or any individual, if they take somebody else's land, then they have to give the person from whom they are taken some rehabilitation and resettlement. They have to return something to them, and they have to either give some fair compensation. That means they have to give them equal money of what their land is worth. Whatever the market value of their land is, that much compensation of money they should be given, or they should be resettled. That means into some new place which has the equal worth of land, they should be given a place according to their permission. So basically what it means is that the government or individual, if they are taking a land from someone, supposingly if you are if I am taking a land from you, then I have to give you the market value of that land. I have to give you either a land of equal value in some place according to your choice, or I have to give you equal money of what the worth of your land is. And this has been done to avoid any form of exploitation, so that nobody takes my land from me and does not give me fair share of the money that I deserve. Otherwise, again, that would be economic exploitation. So as a result of this, any person or any government taking a land for making buildings or infrastructural projects such as apartments or residential places or factories or any such thing, for whatever purpose they may be acquiring my land, they have to give me fair compensation. And this act was passed in 2013, September 2013, and it came into existence from January 2014. And this act has replaced the earlier act, which is an 120-year-old act which was done by the Britishers. The Britishers had a Land Acquisition Act which was passed in 1894. After almost 120 years, in 2014, this act was replaced by the Right to Fair Compensation and Transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation and Resettlement Bill. You may ask, why was it replaced? For the simple reason, because it was done by the Britishers at that time, it may not have been very fair to the Indians. So in order to avoid any loopholes or any mistakes which have been there previously, this new act was passed. I hope it is clear. And the third economic welfare point that we are doing, the last thing for this class, is nationalization of banks, insurance companies and some key industries which have been done to ensure that ownership of the material resources of the community are so distributed as to obtain best service of common good. So basically in the year 1980, in the first turn of events, 14 banks were nationalized, and later in a period of the same year, more 6 banks, that means 20, a total of 20 banks were nationalized in the country. What does this mean? So basically before this, there was no regulated way in which the economy was running. It was mostly based on money lenders or the rich people who were giving money at the rate of interest that they desired. And naturally it was a system of economic exploitation, because if I am lending money to somebody, the person whose interest I will see is myself, and I can take any ruthless or cruel rate of interest, and the poor person who needs the money, irrespective of what the rate of interest will be, if he needs it, he will take it from me. So in order to avoid such kind of exploitation, it was felt by the government, Indira Gandhi government at that time, that all these banks, they should be nationalized. They should be brought under the control of the central government. So that after this, the things such as the rates of deposits, fixed deposit or any such deposit, the repo rate or anything which is decided, that will be decided by the government, by their apex bank, which is the RBI, and other banks will have to follow, so that it is economically just for all the citizens, and none of them they are at the receiving end. So all these banks which you know now, the Punjab National Bank, the SBI, all of these, they are under the nationalized banks. Except for the private banks, most of these 20 banks, they are nationalized. So this was done so that the economic things, which is economy, should be a thing which should be controlled by all the people. It should be for the common welfare. The material resources should be distributed equally for the common welfare of everyone, and they should not benefit a few people. So for that purpose, that is the third point, that the banks and the insurance companies, they were nationalized. They were brought under government control, so that these common things can be equally enjoyed by everyone. So under economic, we did today basically the social welfare points, the social economic equality and justice points, where we talked the first thing you already know, the Right to Equal Education Act, which says everyone between the age of 6 to 14 has a right to free and compulsory education. In government and government aided schools and in private schools, 25% of the seats are reserved for the weaker sections. Secondly, we discussed that scholarships are also offered to the weaker sections, and some of the seats are also reserved in job and government jobs for them, and even in higher education. And we also discussed that recently in 2019, for the economically weaker sections of the general category, also 10% additional reservation has been made in government jobs and higher education. And there were certain criteria for determining who these people who are these economically weaker sections. Then we discussed about the economic welfare, where we said that the first point, there was abolition of zamindari system after independence in order to remove the feudal structure. Secondly, we studied that the land bill which was passed, that replaced the old land acquisition bill, and a fair compensation has to be given to a person if we are taking their land. And lastly, we talked that there was a nationalization of banks and insurance companies in order to make sure that these things are controlled by the government and they benefit everyone and not a few people. The power is not concentrated in the hands of a few people. So I hope today's class is also clear to all of you. Please read from the book and clarify your doubts.